Today, we're going to give our spoiler-free review of Dune Part 2.
I just want to say for the record, as we start this conversation, that I hated my face in your pre-roll that we just did. We're not going to change it because you did a great job, but like I hated my face.
I was like, we can redo it, but okay,
no,
good.
it's too late. We're in the episode now. It's happening.
All
I guess
right.
the video now.
That's good.
So Mallett Head, you and I separately in two different states went and saw Dune Part 2 this weekend.
Yep.
We have not talked to each other about it.
No, it's been killing me.
Not a text message, nothing. I haven't watched or read any reviews.
Me neither.
I'm saving all of my thoughts, all of my reaction for the folks that are going to join us here on Deaton Street. And yeah, I think we should jump right into it.
Ooh, if I quit yawning. Yeah. Yeah, I did the same thing. Cause I didn't, the most I saw review wise was like on Facebook. It was like this movie, blah, 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 like the headline thing.
Yeah.
And that was it.
I saw some headlines before, which is interesting. I don't think that the headlines made me think something different than what it was.
Yeah.
So let's start off. We talked before this and we didn't decide. So I'm going to put it to you now. Do you want to start off with your good? Do you want to start off with your bad?
We'll go good. We'll go good first.
Let's go good. So I'll let you start it off. What was the best parts of this movie, spoiler free?
Okay. So, the best parts for me, I watch movies very technically, and realistically, like I would like to have watched this movie twice before we did this.
I get that. Yeah.
So that way I can watch the movie and then enjoy it. Not that I didn't enjoy it, and then I can go back and critically watch it. So I was kind of doing that the whole time. The sound design, is great.
Yeah.
The score is great. I thought it was really cool. Some of the directions they went as far as like the soundtrack and everything.
Is this Hans Zimmer?
I don't know.
All right, I gotta look it up.
I don't
real quick.
know.
Keep going.
Look it up real quick.
That was also one of my notes. My highlights was the score on Dune Part 1 and 2 is just fantastic.
Oh yeah. The sound effects too. And this kind of pulls from Dune Part 1. I watched a few videos on how they did things for that one. This isn't a spoiler, the dragonfly ships that they fly around.
Oh yeah, they made that like wooden.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Hans Zimmer, by the way, I just looked it up. Hans Zimmer.
It is Hans. It explains so much.
He's so good. He's just
so good.
Literally, as I'm taking notes, so I watched it at the drive-in, so we were in a car, so I could take notes on my phone without being a jerk.
I couldn't.
One of my first ones was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so good." Hans Zimmer ?
Yeah. So score, sound design, the coloring of everything, and I will, explain that further later on for a few parts.
Well, let's dive into that. Not because I think I know what you're talking about, and I think that we can talk about it without saying it. But there's a scene when we go to, like, we focus on one of the families more than the other, and it goes very black and white.
Yes.
I didn't like that.
No, okay. I loved it. Okay. This is why I loved it, and they explained it. And this really isn't giving anything away. It's outside. And you see a shot, and it's a wide shot of the place that they're at. And there's a sun. Yeah, it's a different planet, right? The sun's there, right? The sun is illuminating light. It is a black, fiery, white sun, right?
Yeah.
So that, to me, and this may not be what they were going for, but like for me, it gave it a reason for things to be black and white.
Yeah.
Per se, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it's I don't always love things that are that desaturated. And then for me, then it got a little weird when those characters are no longer in that environment and they're still that pale. And I'm like, okay, but why are they still? I don't know. It was weird to me.
Whenever they weren't in direct sunlight, it wasn't most of the time they weren't that pale. Like they had a little bit of color.
I will say that so you kind of focused on that stuff. I wanted to, but I was at the drive-in, and drive-in, the experiences are great, but it is harder to see. It's outside, and so it's already desaturated for me, I think, because of that. So I might have to again go back and watch it a second time. Plus, we're supposed to be talking about good stuff here. I'm jumping in with the bad stuff.
Well, so for me, it was a neat explanation as to why this stuff was black and white. I liked it. And you take like our son and physics and all this blah blah science. The reason why we see color is because the sky, Sure. This is a totally different planet. So things work differently, or you would think that way.
Right.
And you see it in black and white and you're like, oh, this is what it looks like when you go outside, on a sunny day or a normal day or whatever.
Right.
Like, this is the way the light reflects off of the surface and all this stuff. Like it just desaturates the mess out of it and makes it black and white. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I mean, the editing too, like I enjoyed the movie all around.
The high points for me were the sound design, all of the shots. I mean, there's not a shot in this movie that is not just visually, I wouldn't say perfect, but it's just stunning. Every single shot in this movie is stunning. Some of the editing that they did, kind of surrounding visions and things like that, I thought were just fantastic.
Transitions,
the transitions,
the transitions over time too, because like they're like in the same room, but time has passed, and it's like the same shot, but it's so good.
The editing is so good, but it also didn't seem overboard, right?
Yeah.
They used, particularly there's a scene in there that I was watching very closely because I was like, oh, they're using just a crossfade beautifully. It's just a crossfade. That's all it is. But because of what they're fading back, and they went back and forth between it, and I was like, man, it just kind of goes to show you don't have to really think that hard and use like fancy, amazing techniques. You can use the basics in a way that really excels. I mean, it's kind of like we're both drummers, right? It's every now and then you just need 4 on the floor and it's going to sound perfect. And I feel like there were multiple times through this edit that I was watching. I was like, that's a very basic cut and it just is perfect. It's the perfect cut to use there. If you were to make it more complex and like, sometimes visions, you'll have like a spiral in, the very like Marvel, like bringing you go through the eye type of transition. It's like, no, you don't need that all the time.
To me, it takes away from the story, like it takes away from what's going on in the scene. You see the transition, it's jarring.
Right.
It's jarring to like sit there and watch. And then you try and find if they don't line up, the characters in the same, space on the shot, then you got to find the subject and then, and then you lose it. So
the last thing on the good that I'll say, because there's some stuff I haven't talked about on the good here because I don't think it's very good. The last thing in the good that I'll say is the last act is pretty dang good. The last chunk of the movie is very, very good.
Yeah, they definitely finished strong.
And now I'll say with that, I thought the first couple acts are very weak plot-wise and dialogue-wise.
Really?
So this is what I wrote down. Like my final thoughts were, for a 3-hour movie, things move really quick in the first 2 acts. Like we never get to sit with anything for too long.
Yeah.
We're shown something and then something happens based on that thing.
Yeah.
It's not really like we're shown something 5 minutes in the movie and then 30 minutes later or 40 minutes later something happens. It's more like we're shown something and then there's an action based on what we were just shown. And I get why, because it's kind of a middle movie. We're trying to end up someplace, but I felt like it was really rushed for a 3-hour movie. Like the first couple of acts had a lot of things that they had to get in there. And then I was a little confused at what we were doing and why the stuff was important in the first couple acts. The other thing, I got a little geographically confused in this movie as well in the first couple acts. I was like, who's where? How do they know that? How did that? So there was a lot of that kind of, I would say going into the third act, I was worried I wasn't going to like this movie.
Really?
But I hadn't made that decision yet. But going into the third act, I kind of looked at my phone. I was like, how long do we have left? Because I want a redemption story. I'm kind of annoyed at some of the parts of the movie. It's visually amazing, but the plot is a little bit all over the place in the beginning. And I think the dialogue is very weak. Very, very weak. There was I wish I could. The love story between Zendaya's character and Tim, it just wasn't believable to me in the beginning. I didn't buy it. I bought it more in the first movie when they were like playful.
Yeah.
But then it kind of feels like that love story for plot purposes needed to be ramped up more quickly.
Well, I think my probably not correct explanation for that, or like my like thought process as to why they did it the way they did. They probably didn't want to have a like Dune Part 3, right? So
there is going to be a Dune Part 3, bro.
Well, yes and no, I think. They didn't want, if they easily could have done Act 3 as another movie and spread out a lot. But that's the problem though, because a lot of the stuff that's in like the first couple of acts wouldn't have been a compelling enough movie over a 3-hour span of time. So they crushed it. They condensed it down, and then basically there's like quite a bit of time that passes. I say quite a bit, like a decent amount, like chunks of time that pass. And then they hit Act 3, which is like, we're coming down the roller coaster. So
I really think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I really think that's because that's the feeling that I got, is that, there's not enough story here.
Exactly.
In the first couple of acts. And I was like, I don't really know why we have to do all of this. Like, there's a lot of it that I was like, it feels rushed, but I also, none of it felt earned in the first couple of acts.
It almost feels like Star Wars Episode 5 or something. It's like kind of in the middle. Like, this is a middle movie. Or after the fact.
I got Episode 2 vibes.
Yes.
That rushed love.
Exactly.
That happened in Star Wars Episode 2.
Episode 2, and then like this big thing that happens and it leaves you off, and then like it's about to get crazy bad or whatever. Like it's the stuff is going to get ramped up on the next movie, whatever it may be.
And it does. And look, I left the movie theater or the parking lot. I left the parking lot, which was also a movie theater, excited about Dune Part 3 and wherever it goes. The third act, as much as there are things that I just really didn't like in the first two, and I honestly, I think some of the dialogues are very corny, and they could have, I don't know if the writer's strike was involved in that a little bit, but some of the writing was just too on the nose. And a pet peeve of mine in movies is when characters say things that would never actually be said.
It's not natural.
One of the things that Zendaya's character, Chani.
Dude, I could not tell you. All the naming conventions in there is just, it's so far out, and I didn't even pay attention.
One of the things she said was like, "I'll love you until you change," and I was like, "I've been with my wife we've been, dating for years and years. We've been married. Our 2-year anniversary is coming up. I had never said that." This is not something you say to someone you love. And I understand plot purposes why they said that, but there's just a lot of that where I felt like the first 2 acts were just every single line of dialogue was exposition, and then really bad jokes
Oh, dude, I cracked up because it was funny. Like it was corny, but like just the timing of a bunch of the stuff that they had done. I was like, and like the theater around, everybody in the theater was like dying.
Yeah.
I say dying. We were cracking up. It was funny.
Yeah.
So because the whole movie's serious the whole way, and then they like sprinkle in these little things, and it's like, oh god, okay, here's this guy again.
It felt too Marvel for me, the little jokes. I was like, oh man, like the stakes are so high, and we're making little silly jokes like that. All right, so we're 15 minutes into this video. We will say, for those of you that are watching, we're gonna wrap this up, but on Wednesday of this week, we are going to release a spoiler version of our reaction, which is going to go into all the details, everything that we're not saying on here. But that being said, what's your grade on a scale? A, B, C. What do you have this movie?
I mean, for me, it's definitely like an A-. I'd give it an A. I give it an A+, but I mean, that's like a perfect movie at that point. There were things in there. I also watch movies a lot differently than anyone else that I know.
Yeah.
So I usually like the movie and think it's really good, and I just enjoy movies. Everyone else that I talk to is very much more critical than I am.
I'm gonna give it a B.
I figured.
I thought about B-, but honestly, the third act's just so good. There's just stuff in the third act, and I would say if you're watching this and you're undecided whether or not to go spend the $15 or $20 to go see this and go sit in a movie theater for 3 hours, go watch it. And I promise you, the third act is worth it. You might, if you're like me and you get a little cranky in long movies, you might get a little cranky in the second act with some of the stuff that's going on. But just look at the pretty pictures and get to the third act, and it'll be worth it. The third act's so cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Please, if you're watching this and you enjoy what we're doing, please like and subscribe. If you've seen Dune Part 2, give us your grade in the comments.
Yeah.